Okay, looks like we're live. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Fearless Artist. Somehow my mind's gone blank. The Fearless Artist Community live studio session. This is something we do every month, usually a couple of times a month, getting together, learning a little bit as we teach ourselves to become our own favorite artist, talking about techniques in watercolor as well as how to create a thriving studio practice. And we need a thriving studio practice more than ever in this time of uncertainty and upheaval, anxiety, stress. Just things have changed, and we're a little bit less able to distract ourselves from that fact that life is tough and things are uncertain and difficult. And I think as artists, we develop such amazing coping strategies when times are hard because as artists, we're always kind of struggling through problems that involve mindset, involve understanding our feelings and emotions, and then also working to overcome the mental blocks that can hold us back from being the artists we're meant to be. So we have an advantage, I think, as problem solvers, being able to look at a problem and maybe see opportunities for growth. And maybe knowing also that this too shall pass, that whatever it is that we're struggling with now, that we're feeling burdened by, we believe that perseverance, persistence, focus, hope, taking those making small good decisions one at a time, that they will pay off in the long run. And I lean on that every day. So I'm so glad that I get to share that with you, and we lean on that together. I want to welcome everyone who's joining me live, and also those of you who weren't able to make the live broadcast. I know time zones are a thing, and so it's not always convenient for everyone. And I welcome you whether you're here watching the recording or whether you're here live. I just wanted to welcome everyone here. We've got people checking in from all over the US, from Canada, from the United Kingdom. Don't know if I saw any Australians here today. I know it's pretty weird time of day for all y'all. So just welcome to you. We're going to paint today. And I wanted to continue our series of learning to see like an artist, learning how to translate what we see onto that flat surface of paper. And I wanted to talk about the role line plays in that because that's something I've been working through in my own artistic practice. The last few days, the last few weeks actually, I took on a commission. Which I rarely do, but someone who knows me well and knows my art well reached out to me about making some art for their home. And when I started to share my ideas, I said, I'm willing to do a commission for you as long as you understand that, as long as you're online with the theme I'd like to choose. And also, I do commissions a little bit differently. Hi, Anne. I see you're here from Australia. Oh, Caroline too. Okay, there are some Australians here. Let's just talk about this commission that I took on. You may have seen this painting. I shared it, I think, last week, and this is one of the development pieces for that commission. It's actually the wrong size, which is too bad because I just love it. But she told me a couple of the abstract paintings that she liked that I'd made. And then knowing her and her husband, they love the mountains. So I suggested that we do a series, 3 paintings, the large one to be mountain kind of influenced. It's supposed to be an abstract. And I can't show it to you because it's big. It's like 40 inches, I think. So it's large, and so when I get it done, hopefully I can take some pictures and show you those. But it will not fit on my camera. I don't even know if I can get it into this corner of the studio. But it's interesting talking about commissions, and I'm just going to digress a little bit before we go into the actual plan I had for the lesson. Because I actually have a post on my blog about why I don't do commissions anymore. And you're welcome to read that. I'm sure right now Robin is she's such an awesome moderator, trying to find that link to that article, because every now and then I get, at least once a year, I get an email from somebody going, "Thank you for writing that article about commissions. You've so articulated why I struggle with doing commissioned artwork." Couple reasons I don't like to do commissions. One is it's very, very hard to replicate what's in your the person who's commissioning you, what's in their head. They have a vision for the painting they'd like to see, and you have a vision for the painting you're creating, and then to try to get those two to agree is a huge challenge. Unless you're a photorealistic painter, that's going to be a struggle. And then the other thing that I found is if so you want to work with somebody who implicitly trusts you and loves most of what you do. But then the other thing that happens is if someone commissions you, generally there's contracts involved. There's a lot of, and you can find contracts online to download to use if you're taking on commissioned work, and people take deposits up front and they do preliminary studies, and then at the end of it all, you get the money and they get the painting. But if they aren't happy with the painting, they're not going to enjoy seeing it on their wall. That's really the end result, is you want them to take home something that they're going to love and fall in love with every day. I really feel strongly that paintings belong in certain spaces with certain people. You want to have that heart-to-heart connection. So you want to create that for your buyer, but you also need to feel that for the art. And so you want to be in the mindset where you're connected to the work and you create a connection with them to the work. And it's a huge challenge. And if somebody's not satisfied, there's going to be feelings to overcome, and that can really hinder your buyer's enjoyment of the painting. I want my friends who commissioned this painting, I want them to feel amazing about the paintings when they take them home. I want them to hang on their wall, and every day they look at them and fall in love with them a little bit more. So I emailed them and I said, I'm not going to make you sign a contract. I reserve the right to make work that I feel really passionately great about, and then you can decide whether or not you want to buy it once it's finished. I just did not feel good about locking them into a contract and taking a deposit. And this is probably a controversial point of view, but this is how I feel about it. I'm going to make work that I would be happy to keep for myself or sell or hang in a gallery, even if they don't like it. And if they do like it, then it's a win-win for all of us. So that was kind of my feeling. And Robin did find that article, so you can take a look at my controversial opinions about commissioned work. If you want to take a look at that after the broadcast, it's right there. So that's kind of my feeling on commissions. It's very counterintuitive, I think, or countercultural to not do contracts. But for me, I just felt like I want everybody to feel really great about the end result here. And so I want them to feel awesome about the paintings and then choose to buy them. And I'm just going to make work that I'm enjoying. And even with that in mind, when I am painting work for a commission, intended for someone, it is so hard to feel creative. It is so hard to feel free to paint the way I want to paint and to get every color I choose, I'm like, oh, will this go with their decor? And so yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just been even with that stricture that I'm not going to be painting specifically. They don't have to like it. It still is a struggle for me to stay focused on painting from my heart. So it's interesting, been an interesting process. Those 3 paintings are abstracts, but I'm also working on some landscape paintings, and I wanted to show those to you today. So we're going to switch the camera over. Okay, watercolor inks onto watercolor paper. I divided it into 2 pieces. So you can see the bottom one is actually my preference here. And then I use the graphite powder in quite a large quantity, actually, to create these dark marks. Again, it looks a little raw, and raw feels foreign, raw feels a little bit wrong, but there's also that little glimmer of possibility here and things that I'm thinking about for future paintings. There's something here that feels, has some life to it, and I find that kind of exciting. The other one is the water theme from the land Sky and Water series, and this is full of texture. I use stencils to create the little dots here, and what I do is I take the stencil, which these are from Close to My Heart, and I like them because they're big, 12 inches square. And we've got different sizes of dots. And so I just placed that over my paper and used a magic eraser, the microfiber sponge, to lift. Now the microfiber sponge, one issue that I have with it is that it gets dirty really fast. And as soon as it gets dirty, you see the gray dots start to appear on the white paper. So I'm lifting, but I'm also often creating marks with any paint that gets into the microfiber scrubber. So it's not, for this kind of stencil technique, if I was lifting out with it, I mean, I would just keep turning the sponge so that I stayed with the white. But for something like this, it's a little less precise. So, but I kind of like it. I like that I have the dots showing up here as a gray, and here they're showing up as a lifted out color, as well as over here. So it works if you're willing to be a little unpredictable. Again, this feels like embryonic future work to me as well. And this is a Pearl X pigment powder. I think I can show it to you. One reason I like being in this space, even though I can't see the comments on my laptop while I'm filming on this side of the desk, I can reach on almost all of my supplies just at arm's length. So this is Pearl X powdered pigments. This one's called Super Copper, and it's made by Jacquard. And I have to thank Lisa Hambrock for giving that to me when I was teaching watercolor in Ontario last year. So thank you, Lisa. I've been having fun using it. It's such a beautiful, vibrant copper color. Okay, the Eco Prints. So again, soaking my paper in a mixture of powdered alum and water prepares the paper to take color better and release, I think, the color from the leaves. And then we see the beautiful leaf textures. I really like using this small size for Eco Prints because I feel like when they get larger, it's harder to create a nice kind of composition. So this paper is still drying. Most of these I end up cutting down anyhow. But you can see how unpredictable the colors can be. I had a lot more than just the leaves that you see here. Not all leaves will translate into beautiful color. The onion skin gives that neon yellow. And then this leaf actually has some brown as well as the green. And from what I was reading, and there's lots of tutorials online, they actually suggest not using, the one site suggested using leaves that are still green because they have more color in them, which makes sense to me because as the leaf starts to die, that's when the colors become more vibrant. And so maybe there is less pigment, chlorophyll, or whatever to create. Now, how do I choose which side is going to be used? Both sides are beautiful. This side has the maple keys. And because they're sandwiched together and then wrapped, this time I wrapped them around a dowel. So the layers of paper were stacked together, wrapped around a dowel, and then tied. And then I steamed them over a water and vinegar bath. And so both sides of the paper end up with leafy beauty. Here's some more of those maple keys, just absolutely beautiful. So these are really fun to do. They get me thinking about letting your supplies do their work, which I think is such a good mindset to have as a watercolor artist. And so, oh, this is my favorite. You may have seen this one on Instagram. Really, really vibrant here. And I'm not sure which leaf that was, or I would be out grabbing more and making more today. The other one is I had a twig here, and the twig made this beautiful violet, which looks gorgeous with the yellow. So now I think I'll grab more of those thin little twigs with leaves attached and see if I can't get more color like that. So I've done Eco Prints in the past without soaking my paper in the powdered alum and didn't get as vibrant a result. So I would encourage you, if you want to try it, I think I found mine in the spice aisle of the grocery store. I had checked at the health food store. I checked at the drugstore. That was where I found it. So yeah, really fun to do. And as they've dried, I think some of the colors have gotten a bit brighter and stuff as well. Still a little bit of leaf sediment on there. Okay, so let's take a look at some reference photos. This time I will switch my camera over so that you can see my reference photo. There we go. Okay, so here I have two reference photos I want to show you today, and then we're going to talk about them. This is the one I'm doing for for a neighbor, actually, and this is going to be a Christmas present for them if it turns out this year, because I tried painting it last year and it did not turn out as well. I've got a couple questions. Sarah and Kim are both asking about the paper I used for my eco prints. The paper I used was a watercolor paper. It is 100% cotton, and I mean, you feel free to try different papers, but you do get a better result with a watercolor paper. So keep that in mind. And someone else commented, the one thing I did was I put a handful of pennies into my vinegar and water bath. And someone else commented that if I added, trying to remember what it was, there was something I could add to the ammonia. If I added ammonia to the pennies, to the penny water, I'd get blue. And I think I'd want to make sure I was in outdoors or in a very, very well ventilated space if I'm steaming with ammonia. So do keep that in mind. And I looked at the canning section of my grocery store, and there was no alum there, but they were also completely out of jars. And apparently there's like a universal shortage this year. So everybody's gardening. Okay, isn't this a gorgeous photo? It's just absolutely beautiful. My daughter messaged me. They were watering for our neighbors, and she said, you have to come see the sunset. And I'd been wanting to get a photo of their view because they have a home on the edge of the river. It's just a tiny little river, and you can see to the right the banks of the banks of dirt, basically the cliffs alongside the river. And it's a clay-like dirt that often will have little landslides and mudslides. So it's always kind of this bare dirt area. And I wanted you to see that because I've been trying to figure out how to pull this together into a landscape painting. And so I managed to, last year I did quite a few versions and it just didn't come together for me. And then this year I was able to paint this little sketch here and using this reference photo. The one thing I've really struggled with this scene is trying to get the balance between the size of the house right, but keeping the focus on the cliffs while also having that expanse of the landscape. And it's just been a challenge to figure out how to balance all of those different elements together. So felt really good to finally have a sketch that turned out. And from there, I've been working on further versions, and I really want to paint something big enough for them to hang in their house. They did some really kind things for us over the last year, and I'd love to give them a painting in thanks. So I've been working in that direction, and I have a big version on the go, about 40 inches wide by maybe 14 inches tall. And I'll love to show you that one if it turns out, but I'm still working on it. But I've been trying to just teach myself how to paint this scene. And I have another version that I did yesterday, which I'm going to show you here. There we go. This version, I actually wasn't happy with how the house turned out, so I just tore that end off the paper. Oh, and it's upside down. That's real smooth, Angela. There we go. So the house was on the far side, and I just tore that right off. But I really am getting more confident in how to portray the little cliffs, how to fit together all the different elements. So we're going to talk about that, and I'll show you my sketch as we talk about how we use line to help us pull together the different elements in our reference photo. Additionally, I have a painting we're going to do today. And that is this reference photo here, which is the walk I took with my family on Sunday. And you can see the leaves are pretty much all off the trees here, but we still have lots of color on the ground if you're just willing to look down a bit. And so I did a little sketch, just moving paintings around so I can show you that. I did a little quick sketch of that one, and that's right here. And feeling like I'm making progress with it. One thing that's really interesting looking at it on the camera is that it's very, very gray in the upper half of the image. In fact, the reference photo, because the leaves are off the trees, that's really what we have, is very neutral until you reach the land where the trees hit the ground. So yeah, we've got lots of clouds, we've got so it's figuring out the how everything fits together. It's figuring out what to focus on, what our main point of interest should be, and how we want the eye to move through the painting. And because the painting includes, or the photo includes, a road, that gives our eye a direction to go through the painting immediately. We see the road and we go down it. And roads are just that way. So that really tells us a story of a journey. Actually, in that photo, if you look carefully, you can even see my family. And oops, that's the wrong thing. Let me just turn on. I'm just going to switch over so you can see my reference photo in the corner, and then we're going to start talking about painting this thing. Making sure you can see the work surface this time. Oh, my day. Okay, so we have the sketch here, and this was my first attempt at this scene. I'm just going to switch another light on so it's a little bit brighter. And the first thing I want you to notice is that the road itself is not, we tend to think about, when we see a road like that, we tend to think we want to draw the whole thing just, you know, just like so. But that's not really what we're seeing in our reference photo. In fact, in the reference photo, and I'm just going to switch back to it again, we don't see the bends in the road. Beyond that kind of first curve, we don't see the next bend in the road. It's hidden behind the fence. It's hidden behind the shrubbery there. And so we want to keep that in mind and not just assume that this is what we get. One thing I'll point out here is if my road did look like this, am I talking about flat land or are we looking at hills? And really what we see here is this has a very prairie-like flat feel. And so as soon as we start having the parts of the road cut off by different elements, we start to realize that maybe the landscape goes up and down. So let's just take a look here. First we have our horizon line. We have where everything kind of is cut off and the sky meets everything else. But in front of our horizon line, we don't actually have an unobstructed view. We have trees. So over here we have trees, over here we have trees. They break up our horizon line. So we only have a small piece of horizon that's just in the middle. And yeah, I think you can see that there. And so we're moving into the painting. Our eye often wants to go to the horizon, but our horizon is cut off. And then we have the road in the foreground, which is here, and it really takes up quite a lot of space in the bottom of the painting. We have, it kind of starts here on this side, and then on the other side it's kind of towards the middle. And this starts giving us our sense of distance. And since we're talking about distance, I'm going to pull a couple of other paintings over as well and show you how to quickly create the impression of distance. We see a lot of distance happening in this painting because of the extreme convergence of the sides of the road. We see the whole road standing here before us, which places us right here. If the road was narrower here, we would probably feel like maybe we were floating up above the road or somehow more distant from the scene itself. But having the road this large really makes us feel like we're standing right there. And then it narrows immediately very consistently at this point of convergence, these angles. And then notice off in the distance, those angles change and are basically straight. And that gives us our hill. And so I wanted you to see that those convergence points, when we have things that are moving at those diagonals, it changing size very quickly from wide to narrow, it really gives us a sense of distance and scope. And and you don't have to just do that with roads. You can also do it with the sky. So we have here that quickly converging road, which gives us our sense of distance. And I painted telephone poles, which also this change of scale there mirrors the size of the points of the road. We're seeing that vanishing point happen if you've done any study on perspective. And then we also have the clouds creating that vanishing point as well. This massive clouds, which is large, feels directly over our heads, and then it very rapidly narrows down to that vanishing point as well. And there is just so much zoom in this painting. This is one of those raw embryonic works, actually, that I was not feeling super confident in. But every time I pull it out of my painting pile, I get excited by it because I think there's such an immediacy to those strong diagonals. So I wanted to show you those just to help you be thinking about the scale of the objects in your painting. If my painting here was simply this, we don't have the same sense of distance. It's very static. And I have painted many, many scenes that have that static feel. But if I were to start adding maybe a big cloud at the top and then rapidly scaling down even my clouds, it would start to give us that feeling of looking off into the distance. And it would feel really exciting. And it would give us a bit more of a dynamic that pulls you into the painting. So I think perspective has a good role in if we can note it and create that sense of moving off into the distance, it does pull people into our paintings just a little bit more. So I'm thinking about that, but I know as well that my reference photo that I'm working on today does not have the same rapid recession into the distance. It doesn't have as much distance involved. In my highway scene, we're looking maybe several miles down the road. In this reference photo over here, I'm simply looking, maybe a few hundred yards ahead, maybe a quarter mile. So it's not the same amount of distance. We don't have the same extreme of the scale changing. But we do have some scale changes happening there. I like to teach perspective in small bite-sized chunks because that's all that I can manage, to tell you the truth. Perspective intimidates me. It feels a little bit rigid, like rules. I don't like rules. So when I'm learning about perspective, I like to learn it by trying to pay attention to what's happening in my painting, in my reference photo. So right now I'm focusing on the road itself and just that first part of the road. And I'm kind of going to divide my painting up into chunks. I have some fence posts here that I want to make note of because that's going to help make give my feeling of nearness to the viewer. And then I have the curve of the road itself. I have a fallen log or two here. And then I have I want to pay attention to the lines. I've got shrubbery that comes across here and it kind of feels like a line because beyond this shrubbery, the land goes down, it drops away. And so it's the falling away of the land that means that I don't see the road the way I would if it was on a flat surface. And I have to keep leaning back over to my computer to look at my reference photo because, they're just at different angles today. I'm just going to quickly bring it up on my phone so I have it closer to me. There we go. Okay. And I don't like to be overly dependent on my reference photo, but it's really nice to be looking at it when we're thinking about the different elements and how they fit together. In this particular painting, we do have, just like here, we have some diagonal zigzag lines. Here we had the road going back and forth. It wasn't just a straight road like we had in the paintings, other paintings I showed you where the road converges as a straight line. So we're using the zigzag to help see those curves. And then there's our trees here. They meet the ground, and then we see them come almost to a point here that disappears behind this fence post. And so my road disappears as well. The road emerges here because it's going uphill just a little bit, but then it gets super narrow and kind of disappears again because the landscape goes down in that spot, and then it comes up again here. And so it's actually narrower here than it is here because it's further away and then broken up or interrupted by the dip in the landscape. And so it's these lines that help me find my landscape and how to paint it. And I want to show you that. Actually, I'm just going to zoom the camera in because I want to show you that with these reference photos. This is a sketch I did before I did this little painting study. And so I just looked for my dark trees. I looked for those angles, and I'll often see kind of the landscape. If the land is hilly, I often see these kind of triangular shapes, just like down here, this makes a triangle. This part of the land makes a triangle. We can actually, if this was a hill, this could actually come and interrupt there, and we would actually not see the road. And then it would pop up again here as it goes up the hill again. So we really can create that feeling of depth and altitude. I don't know if that's the right word. Angles of going up and down. So we're seeing that in this reference photo. We have the wide road, then we have a little narrow strip. It's cut off by the landscape of a narrow strip. And then we have it cut off again. This one's actually probably more accurate. And then we have another little narrow strip that comes up and meets the horizon where it dips down and falls away again. I did the same thing with my beautiful sunset scene. We have those little cliffs, and this is hard to see because it's so tiny. But we had the cliffs here. We had the space for the house. We have our trees actually, for me, created the boundaries in this reference. The dark trees create this line across the horizon. Then they also create this line that comes down here and zigzags here and comes up and comes out. And I'm using those darks to create those paths in my painting and help me to kind of orient myself in the landscape. So I use these little sketches, thumbnail sketches. I also use them as value studies. Trying to work just with the dark and light and one middle value to help me understand how things fit together and to create contrast. So today, let's get the paintbrush out. We've got some time, and we'll do a little bit of painting using this as the first version that shows us what we don't know, maybe hoping to simplify a bit. There's a few things that I liked about this scene. Actually, I liked a lot of things about this first reference photo. I really liked the trees and how they came together. It's kind of a gray that I created just from palette dirt. And that gray, let's just shift everything over a little bit more here. That gray granulated quite well, and it created some lovely texture where I didn't feel like I had to paint the spiky branches. I like the way those grays kind of tie the whole scene together. We've got the sky, the trees, and the road, all kind of that similar gray. The other thing I realized as I was painting was that I don't have to be tied to the colors in my reference photo. I could have a little more fun with it than I was having, and I was feeling a little bit committed to the colors in the photo, but I really wanted to simplify. In the foliage of our of our environment here, we have a lot of colors, and I cannot paint all of them if I want these areas not to be so busy. So I want to pull out one overall color to use in various maybe areas of the painting and just simplify it a bit more. So those are some things I've been thinking about. I'm going to try to paint this version in one layer, and because that will force me to simplify, and simplifying is always good. So in my palette I have a kind of a gray violet that was sitting here from a previous painting. I think it's a little bit of cobalt, a little bit of manganese violet, which I buy from Schminke because Daniel Smith doesn't have one. And I was using, I think, burnt sienna as kind of my orange. And that's making it almost too reddish, actually. I want something a little bit, if it's too reddish, I need to add something greenish to it to tone it down a bit. So let's grab just a tiny bit of sap green. And that immediately gives it a bit of a grayer tone. A little more sap green. And I think I want a little more cobalt blue because I don't want it to be too purpley. Oh, see there, we're getting there. And we'll use that for our clouds to start with. And I'm going to mostly lean on my little thumbnail sketch here. So let's just keep that down below here. Because I'm starting with this lovely neutral, that gives me actually several colors for my painting. It gives me a violet. So when I want to use violet, I'll use the manganese that went into this first wash. When I want to use a blue, I'll probably choose the cobalt first. When I want to use a green, I'll use the sap. And when I want to use a brown, I'll go to the burnt sienna. Although I will be introducing other colors. I've actually really enjoyed in the first version, and I'm grabbing some Cinereous blue because I need kind of a sky blue to be like the good weather parts of the sky. The cobalt won't do it. It'll be too much like the clouds. I've really been enjoying using more colors than a traditional limited palette kind of person would choose. And sometimes I'm only using 3 colors in a painting. But for this, I really wanted to get that brilliance of so many colors happening in the fall. We have so many beautiful colors, and so why would I limit myself to just 3? I'm going to pull that sky right down so we can place our trees in just a moment. But I think before I do those trees this time, I want to paint my foliage, the bright colors on the land. And I'm going to use this palette dirt. It was kind of an orangey color. And I think it was Nicolezo yellow. So we'll start there. And Holbein's bright rose, which is pretty close to opera pink, but I think it granulates quite a bit more. But it makes a really nice, you can see this peachy orange. So we're going to work with that. And I'm going to paint that little triangle that I saw in here. We're going to start with that, where the land comes and is interrupted by the road. And I'm going to try to keep it simple. I'm going to see if I can get away with painting it just like a triangle in just that color. I'm curious. Will it be enough, or will I feel like I need more? It's not a perfect triangle. For one thing, it's bleeding up into the sky in a few places. But, and it's, got a few little bumps, and that's because it's nature. Let's add some more Nicolezo yellow. And maybe a hint of the cobalt blue to get it a little bit murky. Actually, I kind of want it greenish. Let's add some green gold and see what that gives us. Green gold is a lot like a yellow. I want a new color, but I want a fall-like color. And we're going to use that, I think, for, trying to think which landscape triangle should I make it for. Let's go this way. The road kind of came here. Oh yeah, I like that. I like that color. And it's going to touch into this first triangle here. Let's use some of the texture of the paper to give us a break between those two elements. It's kind of interesting. And then I think I'm just going to add some more of the green gold and pull it right down. That's going to give me a foundation for the painting, foundation for my shapes. I left white here, and that's going to be very demanding to the eye. I might decide to fill that in with some color, but I'm not going to think about it right now. My board is tilted a little bit so that I have some of the orangey color creeping up into the sky, but not too much. And I really don't mind if it creeps up a little bit because there's going to be trees here. And the angle will help it not to hopefully take over the whole painting. On this side, let's put some green. And I'm going to again use palette dirt. I have this bright green in my palette, which is the green gold, and I think a little bit of phthalo blue. And I'm going to add just a little hint of our burnt sienna to it. Let's see if we can't get an earthy kind of faded green. There we go. Burnt sienna is kind of an orange, so it makes a good near complement to tone down that and I'm just looking for the road here. The road comes up, so we want to leave a gap. There we go. So that something like that should work to give us that. And I think we're going to add a little bit of cobalt blue to that green. And then as we move off into the distance, in fact, we're going to just do that part where the road kind of vanishes again. We'll see our road disappear, and we'll also see our green get a little bit cooler. And I'm just grabbing a piece of paper towel to blot my brush, so that when I'm painting these smaller shapes, my brush isn't too wet. Now, I want to add my foliage here, the part of the foliage that comes up where my fence posts are. So let's do that next. I'm going to use my bright rose and Nicolazo yellow combination again, but I think we'll make it quite yellow. We'll see how that looks. Oh, it's quite a bright orange. And Robin's keeping track of your questions so that I can answer them as we wrap up the demonstration. So feel free to ask questions. I've tried to keep this painting broken down into segments so it's not overwhelming for me. And right now my sky is starting to dry. It's not glossy. Well, there's a bit of a puddle here, but over here it's got that dampness to it, which I think means it's a good time to put in my trees. And I'm going to change brushes for that. I like this Da Vinci Modeler because it seems like it does a nice job of line. So we're going to use our original gray violet that we used for our sky, and we're just going to pull up some line to indicate trees. And I probably will want to do a layer that's a little bit darker, but we're going to start by just getting those basic shapes down. And positioning trees where I want them to go. And we're going to do the same on this side. And my friendly neighborhood blue jay just dropped in to say hello. He's very loud. I don't know if you can hear him from where you are, but I keep wanting to get a picture of him with my camera because he sits on the edge of my balcony and screams at me. They have such they're a beautiful bird with a horrible noise, and he comes to steal the dog food in the dog's dish under the deck here. I kind of like that. We're getting that hint of trees. I got that, and I like the neutral that it creates as well. To me, that looks like a nice break for our vibrant landscape. And I'm going to try this blue apatite. Is this blue apatite? No, it's lunar blue. And just pull out some darks. And I'm working with quite a dry brush. I like the mottler because it's a little bit stiff. And so it gives me those nice crisp lines. I don't get a ton of color bleeding into the damp paper because my brush is drier. And it also lets me kind of dig into the drier color in my palette and get mostly pure pigment. Oh yeah, see how that little pop of dark, just going that one shade darker, really did something nice. And I really like this little glow. There's like a little warm orangey glow right over there, which is really pretty as well. So I really like the feeling of that. Look at how just the addition of those trees pulls the eye into the scene just a bit more. I'm gonna paint my, well actually this is still a little too damp. I wanna paint, there's a distant hill here that I'd like to catch, but I don't want it to bleed. I want it to be fairly crisp and violet, and so we'll do that in a minute. So maybe let's just do the glaze over the road. And to tell you the truth, I like this gray that I've made. It's not really the color that my reference photo is telling me to do. And if you're having trouble with identifying a color, especially these neutrals, what I like to do is just, you can take a piece of paper, white paper, and poke a hole in it. Or actually this is called the view catcher, and it's got holes in it. So you can put that over your reference photo to isolate a single color, and it can help you to identify that color. Especially when it's kind of one of those obscure neutrals, putting that over your reference photo can be really helpful. So I'm just gonna do that glaze of, but I didn't want it to be warm. Like from what I can tell in my reference photo, I'm seeing kind of a beige color, like a brownish, rather than a gray. But I don't want to go that warm because everything else in the foreground is warm. So if I want to have that nice contrast, I can use color temperature and create that cooler road to help it kind of stand out. It's too pale. It's almost still a white. I want it to not stand out too much. So I'm going to carefully and slowly add color to that. And I have to mix a bit more because I've run out. Cobalt blue and burnt sienna. Maybe a tinge of manganese violet. Mostly the cobalt blue and burnt sienna should do it. We're just going to touch in maybe a little bit darker up in here and then along the middle here. I'm also seeing a bit of a dark shadow where the road and the grasses meet that we can paint in later. So we'll let that sit and dry a bit. It's our contrasts that help create that movement into the painting and help us to see the scene. And those contrasts between warm and cool are really valuable as well. I want to paint I'm trying to decide how much detail I want to put in here. My instinct is always to go too detailed. And I know you struggle with this too. It's kind of a human nature thing. We want to paint the details. And so often creating that nice simplified foundation is going to give us a stronger painting. Let's use the mottler to create some twiggy things here. And I'm just kind of going tone on tone, darkening my reddish pink color here. And maybe that will give us that feeling of bushes and I don't know, brambles to walk through. And a little bit of depth as well. I'm just going to pull in a little bit of the green right here, and actually it's giving me a nice kind of shadow where my lines kind of touch the foreground shrubbery, and that shadow is really useful for helping us create depth as well. So love this brush for instantly creating that line and texture. It's really working well. Let's do a little bit on this side as well. I wonder if I went straight in with the bright rose, what that would do? What would that look like? Especially over here where we want to maybe make a little pop of color. That's too much. Let's just soften it a bit. And the fence posts are going to go in here. I'm going to use a small brush for that. I've got this tiny little Princeton round that I use for signing my name, actually. I don't really use it for anything else, but I'm going to pull it out today. Let's use the Lunar Blue, since it's worked as a dark for us, and create a fence post in here. Let's put the most distant one over here. Using a blue will give us a nice pop of cool color up against the warmer foliage. Trying to make that fence post smaller, small-ish. Then we had one over here that's kind of leaning. And I had a kind of a texture gap in my paint right here that made it a good spot to place a fence post. So let's just put that in. This one's leaning this way, and at the bottom here I'm going to create the feeling of grasses just by making that edge a little bit broken. Don't square off the end of your fence post if you want it to look like it's in the grasses. Let's have some broken line there. And then this one's angling the other direction, so we'll place that. And then we'll put one more here. And actually that one uses a little bit of dry brush to create the effect. Now they're kind of floating in the scene right now, so that's where we grab the mottler again, and we're gonna create some grassy texture there. Debating, let's use the burnt sienna straight up this time and see what that does. Where those fence posts are touching the land, we kind of want them to shadow in and look kind of anchored into the ground. So having a little bit of color bleeding between the Lunar Blue and the burnt sienna, that kind of works for us to create that effect with a little bit of speed. This little tiny long round rigger brush, liner brush, whatever you want to call it, it works well for painting little twigs as well. Flick with your brush upward to get a nice point. And I'm already like, this is maybe obsession with details, but just putting a few details in at this stage will hopefully help me to stop, not to do too many. So we're going to leave that at that. It's kind of doesn't have the same impact of this as this one did. And I think one thing that's working actually for this one is that real pop of yellow in behind. Also my sizes are completely different, which is going to give me a different feeling of scale. Maybe Let's make these bigger. It's not too late. I'll be brave and make them larger. I'm going to keep that one maybe the same size, maybe a tiny bit taller. And give a hint of a barbed wire there. Even, yeah, there was barbed wire. Doesn't really matter. If barbed wire helps it to feel like a fence, I'm going to put some barbed wire in. A little bit of burnt sienna on top of that lunar blue just to give it some depth and contrasting color there. And we're at we used up our whole hour already, but I'm just going to keep going a little bit, and hopefully you can stick around as I add a few more details. I do not want to push this too far. It's so much better. Over and over again, I've learned that it's much better to stop when you feel almost done. Almost done is often our thought process says, oh, we're almost done. But so often when I come back to see the painting, I realize that I was a lot further along than I thought, and I can call my painting finished after all. So don't feel like you should have this feeling that your painting is finished when you step away from it. You're actually better off stopping before you get to that point, because we don't have the perspective to keep us from overworking our paintings. So for some reason, we just tend to lose focus and overdo it. It's who we are. There are also times where I chicken out and I don't, and I refuse, or I don't know if refuse is the right word. I stop a painting when I really should have pushed it a little bit further. So I'm always trying to evaluate that. Am I going too far? Am I not going far enough? Because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up. And I waffle between those two extremes pretty frequently. I was going to soften that, but I think I kind of like it. I'm going to leave it. And let's use our gray. Put a little texture on the road. This is the wrong brush for that. I need a brush with a little bit of snap, just to see if I can put some spatter on the road and make it look a little bit textured. So we'll cover the sky up so I don't mess that up. And if I'm putting spatter on the road, the spatter in the foreground should actually be larger because the road is closer to me there. So often what I probably will want to do is the spatter off in the distance, just soften it a bit. So there's just a little spot here and there. And then I'm just going to pop in some texture that's going to give us shadows. It's going to help us to know that the road kind of goes up and down. It's not a super sunny day in this reference photo, so I don't have to put in any strong shadows. The light was very diffused, but putting in a bit of texture here will help the road feel real, I think. Over on this side, we also had a fallen log I wanted to paint in. The fallen log is lying in the grass, so we're not going to see the whole thing. So let's paint a broken line. Add a little water to vary the value. And then maybe pull down a little bit using that mottler and its lovely comb marks to create that feeling of grass is kind of popping up in front of our log. Kind of cool. I feel like, you know, I I could have a lot of fun actually with my brush and popping in a little bit of color here and there. Maybe I want a bush with some bright pink leaves coming up in this area. Maybe we'll do one over here too. You can pull down some twigs with, I'm going to use a green. No, actually I'm not. I'm going to use a burgundy. This is Perylene Violet. You can also make a really nice burgundy with a pinky red and a cobalt blue. And a few little dark twigs in here will also help ground those fence posts in the scene. A little bit of line. Tiny lines over here can also help give us that sense of distance. And then I'm going to finally put in my horizon line using my cobalt blue and get those distant hills. And that's going to give us just a little bit more of a sense of distance in our painting. Now for some, because this area, the tops of the trees kind of fade away, I kind of need that to happen here too, to blend this hill so that I don't know, I need a break between those trees and the hill so we know what's going on a little bit. And maybe a little bit of lunar blue just to create a few more individual tree trunks here and there. There's a white gap. I want to place some more color there. I'm just going to vary my blue and my violet a little bit. I think I'll go a little more violet as I move a little bit lower. The road actually came up. I'll try to zoom in so you can see that better. So we'll put that violet in here. And then finally, I think that little gap, trying to debate what color it should be. The road's just going to come up here, off in the distance. And no one's going to see that except for our subconscious. True things. You know, sometimes people who don't look at every detail in your painting, they'll still take in some of those little details that they don't even know they're taking them in, but they'll see that we have this road in our painting that's going away from the viewer, and they're going to follow it with their eyes, even if they're not knowingly doing it. It's amazing. A little bit more line. I want to place these lines where I want the viewer to look. So I'm not going to worry about the sides of the painting so much, but we just want them to follow the scene right into the painting. I'm going to put a little dark line here because we want them to come up to this part of the scene as well. And yeah, that kind of brings it all together. Let's just back up here. Okay, I'm going to stop. This is that almost done feeling that I try to pay attention to. It's very possible that I might want to come in and put another glaze of color to darken this road. Just a thin veil of additional color can send it backward a little bit. I'm not sure if I'd want to add some detail. I don't know if detail is the right word. Another layer to my sky maybe. let's see here, you know, maybe just bring out some of those cloud shapes. I'm always a little resistant to adding layers to the clouds because I want them to look, I don't want them to look overworked. So I always try to keep the color pretty transparent, and I try not to go too dramatic with my line or my changes. But at the same time, you know, adding a little bit of detail can help bring the eye into the painting just a bit more. And there were some of those lower clouds that kind of, you know, sent us in, which is what we were talking about when we talked about perspective earlier today. So it's just, those are things to think about. Really not good things to think about at this stage when you're feeling almost done and you know your risk becomes overworking the painting. You want to just take your time and dial it back. Step away from the painting and come back to it with fresh eyes. I'm starting to feel like I am ending up with something I like a little bit better than the original. Whoops, let's zoom all the way out. The original version that I tried. This one definitely feels like it's come together better. This one's kind of like a patchwork quilt, all these little pieces, crazy patch quilt maybe, all the little pieces that are just a little bit random, whereas this one has a little bit more of a flow that I feel like makes it a stronger painting. And the next step for me usually is being willing to make some maybe brave choices. What would it look like if I just dashed that road in as one brush stroke with a little dry brush over top of it? You know, what would a version look like if I really let some of the landscape, just a lot of spatter, a lot of flow? You know, those are questions that I'll be asking myself as I do future versions of the scene. So that's a little look at how I work through a painting and how I teach myself. I really wanted in this version to see those triangular shapes that kind of come together to bring us kind of zigzag through the scene. And so we're seeing that there. And I'm happy to answer any questions as they pop up. If you want to paint along with me now that you've seen what we end up with, you can feel free to watch this recording over and over again. As members of the Fearless Artists community, I have this vast archive of video lessons, live streams that we've done, and not many of them include painting demonstrations that you can follow along with. So I'm hoping that encourages you to dive into your landscape paintings, really, to break them down into those simple forms, looking for those, not necessarily vanishing points, but looking for those lines of convergence, how the different parts of the scene, and we almost have to see it as an abstract. Look for your triangles. Look for those triangular shapes that overlap each other in the scene to pull your landscape together. And yeah, I let's see. Kathy comments, I love the pop of yellow, and I do too, actually. In the first version, we really do see a little more contrast between the yellow and the gray, the blue-gray, and I think that would be another good thing to explore. One of my very favorite paintings that I did in a previous year was just indigo and Nicolezo yellow, and those two colors made just such a beautiful combination. So one thing that happens, and I just want to comment on it, is, you know, in this video, I used a lot of different colors. So not all of them work all of the time. Lunar blue is actually a newer color for me to pull into my painting. And I knew that it was kind of an earthy blue and kind of granular. So I knew, I kind of had an idea of what it would do in my painting. And it was a great shortcut to mixing kind of an earthy blue. You can also create a great blue with cobalt and a little bit of burnt umber or burnt sienna. Get your blue a little bit on that grittier side. And so those, you know, and working with the Holbein's Bright Rose, I've been exploring that in several paintings lately. So I'm getting to know what kind of orangey color I can anticipate when I mix those two hues. I'd like to try it with a few different yellows because Nicolazo has that whoosh to it that sometimes can take over a painting. And sometimes I want a yellow that stays in one place just a little bit more. So I've really enjoyed getting to know different colors. I'm always, experimenting with that. And sometimes they fall a little flat and your colors get a little too dull, or they just don't mix in the way you thought. One thing to keep in mind, though, is just like I was mixing in my palette today, and I was saying, oh, my gray violet or whatever is too red, and so I knew I needed to bring in a color that had a bit of green in it. Anytime it's too something, you can add the complement to that color that's too much, and it'll get it back towards the color you're looking for. So keep that in mind as you're playing with color. It doesn't have to feel overwhelming. You don't have to find your exact complement. You just have to be willing to tweak the recipe a little bit as you go along. So thanks for joining me today. We'll wrap this up, but I really enjoyed painting with you. It seems like it's been a while since we did just a full painting demo like this. So I appreciate you being willing to let me go over my time limit, and also bearing with me when I messed up on the camera there. I appreciate so much sharing what I'm learning with you. When I get to teach, it makes me a better painter. So, this is win-win on both sides. And I want to thank you for that. And enjoy your day. Hopefully you'll get to paint some beautiful fall colors today as well. Bye for now.